They called him the King of Hanover. To the police, he was a helpful informant, a man with his ear to the ground who could help clean up the streets. To the desperate young travelers arriving at the train station, he was a savior, a kind of stranger offering a warm meal and a place to sleep when no one else would. But to history, he is known by a different name, the Vampire, the Butcher, a man who didn't just haunt the nightmares of post-war Germany, but walked through them in waking life, wearing a smile and a trench coat. This is the story of a man who hid in plain sight, sheltered by the very law enforcement he was deceiving. A man who turned the desperate hunger of a nation into a weapon. And the most terrifying part, for years, nobody wanted to stop him, because nobody wanted to believe that a monster like this could exist. Welcome to the dark, twisted reality of Fritz Haarmann. To understand how Fritz operated, you have to understand where he lived. This was Hanover, Germany, in the years following the Great War. The country was broken. Inflation was so bad that money was practically worthless. People were starving and families were torn apart. The streets were filled with refugees, drifters, and young men looking for work, looking for food, looking for anything to survive. It was a time of chaos, and chaos is the perfect camouflage for a predator. Fritz Haarmann thrived in this environment. He wasn't a shadowy figure lurking in the alleys. No, he was a known character. He was charismatic in his own strange way. He ran a small business selling secondhand clothes and occasionally meat. In a starving city, if you had meat, you were popular. You didn't ask where it came from, you just ate it. But Fritz had another job. He worked with the local police. He was an informant. He carried a badge, and it's not a real officer's badge, but an official identification card that said he was working with the authorities. This little piece of paper was his ultimate shield. It gave him power. It gave him an aura of authority. When he approached young runaways at the massive Hanover train station, they didn't see a threat. They saw a man connected to the law. They saw safety. He would patrol the station looking for the lost and the lonely. He'd spot a young man sleeping on a bench, shivering and shaking, starving. Fritz would approach with a gentle voice. He'd offer them food. He promised them that everything was going to be okay. And because they were so desperate, they went with him. They walked right out of the station, through the winding streets, and into his attic apartment. Most of them were never seen again. What happened inside of those walls is the stuff of nightmares. But it was also a masterclass in manipulation. The neighbors heard noises. Sure, they heard thuds. They heard machinery. But Fritz explained it away. He was a businessman, he said. He was dealing in black market goods, smuggled pork, illicit supplies. In those days, everyone was doing something a little illegal just to get by. So the neighbors looked the other way. They didn't want to get involved. Fritz wasn't working alone though. He had a partner, Hans. Their relationship was toxic, volatile, and deeply dangerous. Hans was the one who often pointed out potential targets, choosing them based on their clothes or their belongings. It was a cold, transactional arrangement. They were hunting. But the most disturbing aspect of Haarmann's reign of terror wasn't just the disappearances. It was the rumors that started to circulate about his other business. Remember, Fritz sold meat. He sold sausages and jarred pork on the black market. He was known for having a supply when the butcher shops were empty. People ate what he sold and they fed it to their families. Years later, after the truth came out, a collective sickness would wash over the city of Hanover. The realization of what or who they might have consumed remains one of the most gruesome, unconfirmed details of the entire case. While it was never strictly proven in the court that he sold the remains of his victims as food, the circumstantial evidence and the sheer volume of meat he moved suggest a reality too grim to fully process. Fritz operated with impunity for years. The police actually liked him. He would sometimes turn in other criminals, petty thieves, or political agitators just to keep his handlers happy. Fritz was playing a double game, using the police to protect his own dark hobby. There were times when parents of missing boys actually went to the police, desperate for help, and the police sent them to Fritz, saying, "Go ask Fritz. He knows everyone at the station. If your son is here, Fritz will find him." Imagine that, the parents asking the predator to help find their child. But every house of cards eventually falls. The sheer number of missing persons began to pile up. The river which ran through the city started to reveal secrets that could no longer be ignored. It started with a skull, then a bone, then another. In May of 1924, boys playing by the river made a grisly discovery. The police tried to dismiss it at first, claiming these were medical specimens or old bones from a cemetery. But then more were found. Hundreds of human bones. The riverbed was paved with them. The water had receded, and the truth was lying there in the mud. Suspicion finally turned toward the man who lived right near the river. driver, the man who was always at the train station, the man with the meat business. The police began to watch Fritz. Fritz's downfall came not from a brilliant detective's deduction, but from a public altercation. Fritz was seen arguing with a young man at the station, a potential victim who had sensed that something was wrong. Police intervened, and for the first time, they didn't just take Fritz's word for it. They searched his apartment, and what they found ended the reign of the vampire. It wasn't just the bloodstains on the walls or the possessions of the missing boy stacked in piles. It was the sheer scale of it. They found clothes belonging to dozens of different people. They found tons of identification papers. It was a graveyard of memories. During the interrogation, Fritz didn't cower. He didn't beg. He was surprisingly open. Almost arrogant. He talked about his actions with a chilling detachment. He admitted to ending the lives of at least 24 young men, though experts believe that the numbers are much higher, possibly over 50 or even over 70. Fritz described his method. It was intimate and terrifying. He would dispatch his victims by biting into their necks, severing their windpipe in a moment of frenzy, and this is why the press dubbed him the Vampire of Hanover. It wasn't a weapon that took these victims, it was him. The trial was a media circus. The entire world watched as the werewolf took the stand. Fritz seemed to enjoy the attention. He smoked cigars, made jokes, and interrupted the judge. He blamed the hard times. He blamed his victims for being willing to go with him. He blamed his partner Hans Granz. Fritz took no real responsibility for the horror that he caused. He was declared sane enough to stand trial, sane enough to understand his actions. The verdict was inevitable. He was found guilty and sentenced to the ultimate punishment. In April 1925, the Vampire of Hanover faced the guillotine. His last words were not of remorse, but a simple statement of acceptance. He was gone. But the story didn't end with the fall of the blade. The legacy of Fritz Haarmann lingered over Germany like a dark cloud. He became a symbol of the Weimar Republic's collapse, a sign of how bad things have gotten. That a man could eat the children of a city while the police shook his hand. Fritz's brain was actually preserved for science. It was studied for decades by researchers, trying to find a physical cause for his evil, some sort of defect in the structure of his mind that could explain the inexplicable. They found nothing. Physically, his brain was normal. The evil wasn't a tumor, it was a choice. Today, if you walk through the old town of Hanover, the streets are paved over. The past is buried, but the story remains a warning. It's a reminder that sometimes monsters don't look like monsters. They smile. They offer help. They have friends in high places. And sometimes, they're the ones we trust to keep us safe. Fritz Haarmann wasn't a ghost or a ghoul. He was a man, and that is the scariest part of all.